chaos into creativity in the online-offline classroom. I think that's a very promising and exciting topic for today. Today, we have Thom Jones as a presenter of the workshop. Welcome, Thom. You are with us from Wales today. That's very exciting. And well, just a very quick introduction. I think it has been hard for us to make a brief introduction, but this is the result. So Thom Jones has lived in more than a dozen of countries and delivered trainings in over 70 countries already. He started out as a teacher, then director of studies and principal. He now runs his own company named Brock Solutions Agency. He started working with telc in 2014 on business development in a variety of markets. He has been lucky enough to deliver training for telc all over Europe and is also a trained telc examiner and exam center inspector. He presents regularly around the world on a range of topics and is a guest lecturer at 4 universities. I'm sure there's much more to say about you, Thom, but I will just this introduction, and without further ado, I would like to hand over to you and start the workshop.
No, thanks for that, Simona. It's kind of you. I don't know if I can back up any of the quality things that you've said about me. Why are you here again? And I actually started working with telc, and it was Simona's fault. So Simona was representing telc at a conference in Liverpool, and telc had really good candy on their stall, which I stole quite a lot of, and then I felt guilty about stealing it. So I then started talking to them. And Simona, it turned out, speaks fluent French because she has worked in a variety of countries where that was a good thing, and she's clever. So I also speak French very enthusiastically, so we struck up a friendship like that and ended up working together. And I think that's probably the nicest thing about our industry, is that we can do that and you can chat to people and then work with them, which is good. And whatever we do in terms of teaching, I think what's really important, and today is really a good example of that, is I've got a lot of questions but I haven't got a lot of answers. So my thoughts very, very much in terms of what I'm going to do with you today is I'm going to talk a little bit, if that's okay, about what we've learned from lockdown and what offline and online teaching have brought to us and can continue to bring to us and where that might lead. But what I'm mainly going to do is talk to you and ask you questions. I don't have the answers. So I've got a variety of experience, but you all have a lot of very different experience. And what I can't do is tell you what will work for you and what will work with your students and what will work in your context, because I don't know them. And you all know much more than I will ever know about your own students and your own ways of teaching. Some of the things that I really enjoy working on and really enjoy using in class may be of no use to you at all, because why would they be? On one level, you know, very much as I quite enjoy drinking tea, there's never any reason why somebody who likes drinking coffee is going to suddenly like drinking tea because I tell them that tea is a good idea. And I think that's also very true with students, because we often find ourselves doing particular exercises with students or particular techniques of things with students. And I often go to educational conferences, much as you do, I'm sure, where somebody will say to you, this is what we need to use with students and this is how students learn. And of course, that's true, but it's only true for some of them. So we're just going to have a look at those things today and see where we go. Does that sound all right? Okay, good. I am in North Wales, which is spectacularly beautiful, but also really cold and really rainy today, because that's what summer is like in North Wales. Linguistically, there's actually 5 words in Welsh language for rain and only 1 word for sun. And I didn't learn that word until I was 16 because I never needed it. So if we can just start out with looking at the online teaching elements that we've all become familiar with, often against our will, over the last few months for very obvious reasons with this pandemic. What I found really interesting was the online teaching thing is something that I've been involved in for a few years, because there is an obvious kind of leap in that direction and it works really well for people in terms of flexibility and checking in and checking out. But overall, and particularly in the state sector, that hasn't been a big thing at all. And then suddenly we've had the coronavirus crisis and people have gone from Friday, school is closed, to Monday, you're teaching online, often with no preparation or training. And I spent a lot of time over the last few months doing training with teachers. And what was really interesting was when I first did that, when people hadn't worked online before, everybody said, I hate it, and I've got no rapport with students, and I don't know if they're engaging, and it's horrible. And within about 2 weeks, everybody went, this is amazing. I'm loving it. I can stay at home and I can just click and they're gone. Oh, and people were saying, it's just brilliant. And there is a real liberty, I think, with working from home, and there's a real liberty from teaching online in terms of the kind of burden on us as teachers to do a day-to-day job where you are in a room, but also in a school, but also in an office, but also, and you're suddenly there for 8 hours a day, and not being in your own home is a huge thing and makes a massive difference. But it also crosses certain frontiers, because you do quite literally suddenly have students in your living room or in your kitchen, and they might be online in your kitchen, in your living room, in wherever it is in your house that you work, but they're still in your house. And there's a level at which that's a kind of intimacy, isn't it, where they're in your house and you're sort of in their house, and it's maybe not as professional as it normally is in the classroom, where you're there and you're the teacher and they're the student, and there's suddenly a kind of crossing of barriers. And that's been really interesting for a lot of people, because we're also seeing that linguistic thing where when people are speaking a foreign language, they often say things that they would never normally say. Similarly, online, a lot of people will do and say things that they would never do face to face, and they would never do in real time. And that's been a real shock for a lot of people, good and bad, because you can't really be shy in an online classroom, can you? You can't hide at the back in an online classroom, because you can just go, right, participants, bang, you're on. And that's great, and that's a good thing. The learning is really interesting as well, because what we've essentially got, I think, with learners are 3 types of learner. And those types of learner for me are people who are, object learners because they're learning to pass an exam, and that's the object of the class, or learners who are subject learners and they're ticking a box and that's why they're studying it, but they don't need it, or leisure learners. And leisure learners are people who are learning languages much in the same way that some people go to a gym. So they're keeping their kind of mind active and brilliant by learning a language, but they don't need it. They don't actually want to learn it, to use it as such. They just want to learn it as a kind of academic exercise. So similarly, when you go to the gym and you do that lifting stuff, you're lifting things, but you're never actually going to lift anything. You're not lifting things because then you're going to go out and carry a boat. You're just lifting things in a gym, and it's not muscles you'll use. And a lot of people, in terms of leisure language learners, only learn for the pleasure of learning, but not actually to then use the language, which is a really important point. And there are a lot of those people. I think what's interesting about the online elements of learning, that kind of mental gym of kind of clicking in, clicking out, that you've got 20 minutes. So you do the apps, the Duolingos and all this sort of thing. And Duolingo, interestingly, and because of the lockdown actually, has had a massive jump in people able to go to university using their Duolingo score, which is terrifying on one level, because it's like that thing of getting like a 9-year-old to play Medal of Honor, right? And they're quite good at Medal of Honor, and they've got to one of these sort of video games of running around shooting people, and then they get kind of parachuted behind enemy lines, and it's not the same thing, and it's not because you can play a driving video game that you should be given a driving license. And I often feel that the way that we learn online in terms of self-study is very comfortable and very safe, and that's great. But it's not realistic, is it? Because what happens when we learn languages is always that worrying thing where we learn languages like we learn a song. So we learn that you go in the shop and you say, bonjour, je voudrais un kilo de pêche. And the person says, voilà, €5, right? And you pay €5 for a kilo of peaches, even if nobody's ever got a kilo of peaches. Realistically, I've not got any peaches. I don't like peaches, but we learn languages like bang, bang, bang. This is the system, and it's like learning music and learning a song. So we can sing that song, but we can't play music. So we might be able to, with our mouth organ, ladies and gents, we might be able to play the tune that goes along with those words. So we can go, but we can't actually play the mouth organ. We can play that song, but we can't play them out all of them. And I think language is often the same way, that we can have one conversation where, we're in Wales, for example, now, and my family is from North Wales. The things I can do in the Welsh language are things that I did as a child. So I can tell off small boys very fluently, because as a small boy, I got told off a lot. Not enough, obviously, in the view of some people, and that does mean, I think, that you tend to learn in groups, lexical groups and whatever else. And I often feel, we often talk in terms of online teaching and offline teaching about making students feel comfortable and about making them feel safe. Obviously, part of the thing in the pandemic was people talking about making students feel safe and feel comfortable because they'd be stressed because there was a pandemic. And you sort of think, well, that's true and that's a good and laudable aim. But you also think, yeah, but it's a pandemic, isn't it? So it's terrifying, because we were doing a lot of stuff in terms of training with teachers where everybody was kind of trying to pretend it's normal. And you sort of say, well, your students and a lot of the teachers that you're working with, your colleagues, people are very worried about their own health, the health of their friends and family, but also a general thing of thinking, my God, am I in a very bad movie? Because part of the thing with this whole pandemic has been, and 2020 in general as a year, is that it has felt like a really bad film. I keep waiting for Bruce Willis to kind of come in and make it all feel better, which hasn't yet happened, but I'm not beyond hope for that. Bruce Willis turning up in a vest, smoking a cigar and sorting everything out. Still time. Now, can I ask you to do a thing, ladies and gents? Can I ask you to get a pen, write down 5 verbs, and then, ladies and gents, what I'd like to do is, and this is slightly more complicated, I'd like you to write down 5 adjectives. So we've got 5 verbs, we've got 5 adjectives, and now we need 3 place names. 3 place names. 3 place names. And now 3 people's names. Martin, Michelle, Maria. 3 people's names. And now we need 1 fruit. And now you need 1 mode of transport. 1 mode of transport. A skateboard, a bicycle, a car, a plane, 1 mode of transport. And now, gather round. Now you need, ladies and gents, the title of 1 film. And now, ladies and gents, you need 1 animal. 2 things that you find in a kitchen. 2 things that you find in a kitchen. Okay, we need the title also of 1 song. It doesn't have to be an English language song, but if you write the title in another language, translate it into English so everybody will know what you're talking about. We need 1 more word on that list. 1 more word, and it has to be, ladies and gents. Okay, what I want is 1 landscape feature. Lake, mountain, anything. Right? Are we finished? Has everybody got a device with which they can play music? Yes, good, okay, nothing. So what I would like you to do now is I would like you to select a piece of music that you enjoy, and I would like you to play it in your own head. And while you're doing that, with that list of words, what I would like you to do is I would like you to write a story. You have to use all of the words on your list. You can use any other words you want to, but you have to use all the words on your list, right? Your story has to be at minimum 200 words, okay? Yeah, the reason that I use this a lot is because you can use it for anything at any time. Because obviously, the words that you get students to put in the list can be any words at all to suit exactly what you want them to do. And also, for example, I'll often get them to use, verbs about a topic or about a theme, or adjectives about a topic or a theme, or even verbs that we've used in a previous class and we want to look at using again. Or I'll tell them, in terms of tasks, they can write a story, they can write a narrative, they can write an interview, they can write a blog post, they can write a review of a product, they can write an article, they can write anything. And I think what's lovely about this is students will always do this, and they'll kind of look at their page of random words or their text on the screen and go, it's a nightmare. And you'll say, no, but look, all you're doing is, look, you're joining up. So you've got, Mary went to Budapest and she ate a banana and travelled to, and so you're showing them how they connect those words, because actually it's much easier to just connect words than it is to just have a blank page that you fill. And it's so like what you do professionally with language, where if you're working advertising and your boss suddenly says, right, I need 500 words about soap by 5 o'clock, then you've got a list like this in your head, haven't you? So I think it's really useful for students to be able to do this, and I often do this with students again and again and again. And with very basic students, it's obviously a struggle, but it's much easier to connect words that you already have than to dream out, dream up words. And what's interesting, I think, is with students, quite basic level students will often work on this in their own language. So they might, if we're in Germany, for example, they will work on this in German, but the work they produce is in English. And there's that thing often where we do the thing of going English only, English only, English only, or French only, or German only, whatever you're teaching, insisting that they speak the language of the class. And I kind of always feel like, well, it's really clever that the students in the class can speak Hungarian, German, or Russian, or it's really clever they can do that. And also, they are translating in their heads all the time, because we all are, aren't we? And let's celebrate that. And I often find, for example, for myself, where I've been teaching in countries where I don't speak the language, I'll often get students to translate something, and then they'll read it out, and I don't know if it's correct because I don't speak the language. Even if I do speak the language, I'll sometimes pretend that I don't. And other students will correct them if there are problems, because out of the 30 people in the room, some people will be following what's going on. And also it's that thing, I think, where we change the dynamic, don't we? And we stop being the expert in the room, because as a teacher, it's really easy often to feel like we are, we're really important and we really know what's what, and we really understand because we're the teacher. And actually, all we understand is the third conditional. Doesn't mean we understand life. And I often find with language teachers, we can become quite arrogant, for want of a better word. Teachers in general can often feel like they are the expert in the room. And we're the expert on the third conditional. And in fact, for myself, I'm not even the expert on the third conditional, because I don't really understand the third conditional. But, what we're doing, I think, often by getting students to, A, feel slightly uncomfortable is a very realistic preparation for speaking a foreign language, because you do feel uncomfortable and you do feel stupid when you speak a foreign language. And in my case, certainly, I often sound stupid when I speak a foreign language. So, for example, German, I've never lived in Germany, but I've done a lot of work in Germany and I've got a lot of German friends. I can speak reasonable German, but I sound like Tarzan when I speak German, because I haven't really got any grammatical base. I've never learned it properly. I can just chat. That is something where I often feel our aim as language teachers is partly to teach the language, obviously, but I feel if our students come out of our class and they feel confident and they feel clever, then I feel brilliant, job done. And they may not feel confident and clever in the language that they were supposed to learn. Ideally they do. But if they feel confident and clever in themselves, then you think that's a great skill, And so with this exercise, what I'll often do is I'll get students to do it in pairs, I'll get them to do it alone, and they write the story, and then they stand up and they read the story out. People don't like standing up, and they don't like reading things out. But if they don't do that, and online it's great, because obviously you're just going, right, you've got the camera, on you go, bang. I would do that with you now, but I kind of want to crack through some of the stuff, so I won't do that with you now, although you'd be great. Yeah, I know you'd all be great. In fact, some of you I do know, so I know you'd be great. But I'm sure you would all be very good. But the, getting students to stand up also is the thing where I'll get a student to stand up and I will sit down. Because otherwise, if the student sat down and I'm stood up and I'm going, right, Martin, talk, then Martin kind of goes, and nobody's listening, because everybody's looking at me, the teacher, to see if Martin is wrong and in trouble. And so I often find it's really important to let Martin stand up and let Martin talk. And if Martin makes mistakes, fair play to him. Whatever he's doing is fine when he stood up. And if Martin learns nothing in my class other than it's okay to stand up and talk in front of a group of people. That's a great skill. And people often say to me, yeah, but your classes must be very difficult for students that are shy. And that's true. But then, job interviews are difficult for people that are shy. School in general is difficult for people that are shy. Social interaction is difficult for people that are shy. Dates are difficult for people that are shy. Going to university is difficult for people that are shy. So actually, if I help them deal with that by making them feel uncomfortable, but then realizing they can do it and feeling confident, that's good, I think, possibly. But then again, that works for me, may not work for you. I don't know. You're the expert on you. And I think, this exercise is very simple and really, it's a Swiss Army knife thing, isn't it? Because you can go in any direction with it and you can do it all the time. And it's great because everybody's kind of able to get the hang of it. And what I find is students love the format and they kind of know the format, so they get to feel more confident. Anyway, okay, the next thing we're going to do is a little different. All right, the next thing we're going to do is very simple and it's very, very easy. And all I want you to do is I want you to pick up your telephones, ladies and gents. Pick up your telephones. You've all got a telephone. And what I want you to do is I want you to look at the alarm section. So looking at the alarm section of your telephone, ladies and gents, what I'd like you to do is I would like you to set the alarm. So when you next have class, tomorrow, whatever, later today, I don't know, when you next have a class, set your alarm to go off at some point during that class, okay? Now, what we do with the phone is a very simple thing, and there's kind of 3 techniques here. So my phone, I will set to go off at a random point during my class, right? So I'm doing something or listening to people, and my phone suddenly goes, dum, 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 dum. Ring, ring, that's my telephone noise. Ring, ring, right? And the student's going to go, right? And I either, if everything's going fine, model good behaviour, turn it off, put it away. And the students all say, I will do that the next time my telephone rings. Students never say that. No students of any age, from any nationality, have ever said that. But anyway, what I'll often do is I'll answer the phone, right? So my phone rings and I'm like, right, hello, yeah. Okay, oh, hang on. No way. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll leave the room, ladies and gents. Right? So I've got my phone's wrong, and I've gone, wait, hang on, sorry. Right, non, j'ai jamais dit ça, moi. J'ai jamais dit ça. Et je ne le dirai jamais. Parce que, mais franchement, et puis non, et que, j'aurais jamais dit ça. Non, mais, so what I'll do is I'll leave the room, and I'll often have quite an animated conversation, sometimes in a different language that I know the students don't speak or don't speak very well. Right? But sometimes just in English, whatever. And I'll come back in the room, I'll put my phone away, and I'll go, okay, page 48. And the students go, what was our phone call? And I'll go, yeah, it turns out that my mother's been kidnapped. Right? And students go, and they might laugh, and they might, doesn't matter, it's all right. And then what we're doing is we kind of present the students with a scenario, and they talk us through the scenario and how we deal with that scenario. And what students love about that, and they love this at any age, is they love the fact that they're not in class, and we're not looking at the book, and we're not doing page 48. We're doing something that feels cheekily like not doing that. And they're like, or at least they are in my classes. This may just be me. But the other thing I love doing with the phone is, I presented language to students. So I've said the scenario of my mother's been kidnapped, or my wife's having an affair with my brother, right? Which she should do because he's really nice, but different. Anyway, and I present them with a scenario, and they then start talking through that scenario. And what I'm trying to do is elicit language from them. So, for example, I said that my mother's been kidnapped because I want them to give me advice, and I want them to propose solutions. And then I'm going, like, page 48, giving advice. It was a trap. And they're like, oh, hate you. But they don't always do that. The other thing I do with the phone, which I find really useful, is with my mother or your mother or whoever, I work with somebody else, a colleague in a different class, in a different school, and they have 7 scenarios, right? So scenario 1 is they have ordered a thing and it hasn't arrived. Scenario 2 is that they need to arrange a meeting. Scenario 3 is that, so on, right? 7 random scenarios with a light system of green for happy, orange for indifferent, angry for red, right? What I do, beginning of the session, is I'll text my mother, friend, colleague, and say, can you give me a number 3 green, right? And at some point in the class, and I can pinpoint the time, they will ring up and I'll go, oh, hang on, sorry, and I'll give it to a student. Right? This works really well if I'm doing one-on-one, but with a group, it's fine. Particularly if somebody's being difficult and I don't want to confront them and get into that discipline confrontation thing, I'll just give them the phone and I'll say, it's for you. And they'll go, what? Or also, I'm busy, can you answer it? And give them the phone, right? And the students then kind of answer the phone, go, hello, and they're suddenly not causing a problem anymore, right? And they're on the spot, and you haven't had to have a fight with them, and you haven't had to confront them, but they're busy and they're doing something fine, right? And they go, oh, yeah, right. And I'm going, thank you, great, thanks. Because I'm also valuing them and saying, good for you, thank you. This particularly works, I find, if I am in a country where I don't speak the language or the students don't think I speak the language. And what I'll do is I'll say, oh, look, actually, sorry, does anybody speak German if I'm in Germany? And they'll go, yes, because they're German. And I'll go, brilliant, thank you. And I'll give them the phone and the person will speak German with them. And the German student will then have to translate that for me. So they'll say to me, oh, you need in fact to meet this person on Thursday at 7 o'clock and they are only able to come for 1 hour and they won't eat any ice cream or whatever the scenario is. Can I apologize to German speakers for my silly German accent? Like most British people, I do occasionally think I'm funny, so apologies for that. The other thing which I've found really useful, particularly in offline classes, but again with a kind of technological thing, is that thing of when we say to students, right, talk to the person next to you, and we're practicing some target language or a scenario that we've looked at, often they will kind of go, oh, and they'll turn to the person next to them and they'll say, how are you? I am okay. Yeah. And they're not interested because they know that they share a common language and it isn't English. So what I've started doing the last few years, which I found very powerful, is I'll say, right, prepare the dialogue and then do the dialogue with the person next to you, but film each other. And they've got their phone and they have to film each other. And it's amazing the difference that makes for students, again, any age. Students will kind of go, oh, right, okay. And they make a real effort to make themselves, and then I would like to ask for 15 kilos of peaches. And they make this great effort that they don't make at all if they're not being filmed. Of course, nobody's going to see the film, but they do suddenly make this great effort. And I find that really powerful. It's really enjoyable. So that's a really nice thing to do with phones. I think it's great. And again, that also works with the online stuff. Getting people to actually do screen grabs of them talking is really powerful. One of the things which I absolutely love, and I did this last year and it was just amazing. I was working on a project in Italy and I had a group of students who were, 13, 14, and they were all quite low level and they all felt very stupid, because they'd either been told that they were stupid or their inability to perform in the classroom made them feel really stupid. And so what we did was practiced a variety of speaking exercises, and then they filmed each other speaking for, I think it was less than 20 seconds of just them delivering a little bit of English language dialogue to the camera. And, a lot of that kind of, my family is 5 people, we live here, just very basic stuff. And they had to go home as their homework and show that video of them speaking English to their grandparents. And what was amazing for them was all of their grandparents, just the same as, your grandparents, my grandparents, on seeing their grandchild speak another language. And the grandchild thinks that they don't speak English very well. But for their grandparents are like, oh, that's amazing, you're fantastic, you're so clever, that's brilliant. And they are clever, and they are brilliant, and it's just lovely and a really nice way of doing that, I think. And I've got older students and adults to do that as well, and it does boost people's confidence a great deal. So they film themselves speaking in English or whatever the target language is, and then they show the video to somebody else of them doing that, and it's just great. It really boosts them, and it really makes them feel great because it is clever and it is magic, and it's really great to make students share that and understand that. All too often, I think, and that's one of the things we looked at here, students do feel like they are. They are stupid. They feel like, oh God. And you often see that in the staff room, don't you? When you come back in and say, so, how was your class? They say, oh, the class are just stupid, aren't they? And you think, possibly some of them maybe, but no, like you've got to kind of make everybody feel like an expert in the room. And I think, we can do that really easily. And I think it's lovely being able to do that. And I found that particularly useful with the whole lockdown thing, was there were students who were significantly more technologically proficient than a lot of their teachers. So allowing students who may be not very successful academically, but were technologically very able to actually run the class and run the technological side of the classroom, took a burden off teachers who were already struggling because it's stressful and difficult, but also made students feel really valued. And I think that's always really important. And I do that again with music quite a lot, where I will, during exercises, when I give the group work, I say, right, can you all do this? And they start doing this, and I will play music, right? And nobody ever in the entire history of ever has said to me, oh, I love that song, what's that song? But what I'll often do is, if I have a student who I think will struggle with the exercise, or a student who maybe will become a problem during the exercise, possibly because they will struggle with it, but whatever, I'll often say to that student, listen, can you choose some music for the group to listen to while they're doing exercise? Because you've got great taste in music. I know that you know lots of really great music. And the students kind of go, okay, yes. And, the music is often interesting, so that's kind of enjoyable as well. I want us to have a very quick look at a very quick thing. If you can all just take your telephone or your laptop or whatever, and can you just Google mass trespass 1932? Okay, so we'll just try this together. And okay, so mass trespass 1932, and all you're looking for is hopefully the Wikipedia entrance for mass trespass 1932. So you should be getting the Wikipedia. What we've got with the mass trespass 1932, the reason I'm using that is because I've found it in the last year or two a really good way to talk about the environment strikes, that the Greta Thunberg thing that a lot of our students, I'm sure, have been joining in with, of the striking for the climate on Friday. And a lot of students are trying to work out how they feel about that, trying to work out whether they want to participate in that and how they want to participate in that. And I found looking at mass trespass in 1932 was a good enough example, because trying to look directly at the situation now is in some cases contentious, and some cases is putting students at odds with what, for example, they might be being told at home. So, for example, if their parents are saying, look, you can't be doing that, you shouldn't do it, and it's silly, then that's been quite difficult for a lot of students, So I found looking directly at that put them sometimes in opposition with their parents, which is not a great situation to be in. But looking at the situation in 1932 was politically far enough away that they could look at that and draw their own comparisons. Two things which I think are really useful with this, which I'll just put in, are there is a song called, Ewan McCall's done a song called Manchester Rambler, and there's another song called You Can by the ingloriously named Chumbawamba. If you Google both of those, they are great songs, and they're quite interesting about this particular case. There's also a really good video on YouTube. Again, if you put in mass trespass 1932, it's the first thing that comes up. And it's a 10-minute documentary about this thing. And it's a really good way of looking at non-violent protest, and a really good way of assessing students' feelings on that and where they want to go on that. Because I think what's been really interesting for me in the last couple of years, but sort of always, but particularly in the last few years, is teachers are, all of us are generally relatively liberal, relatively open-minded, particularly maybe language teachers can often be, you can't generalize, but we're often relatively liberal, we're often relatively open-minded, or at least we think we are. And we will often inflict that on students, So it's really interesting watching a lot of materials developed in North America or developed in Western Europe that are filled very much with a perspective which suits people who, write materials and teach in northern, North America or Western Europe. And we often feel that we have the right to impose our opinions on students, and we often feel that we should help students feel or see their position on a topic. And it's a really difficult one, because obviously there's a lot of things which all of us believe very passionately in terms of politics, in terms of maybe religion or whatever it is. And, it's very hard to, as a teacher, try to keep those things out of your class. And it's also, sometimes it feels like a moral imperative, doesn't it, to say to students, no, look, that's not all right. It's this. You've got to think this. And then you think, well, hang on, no, look, why is it all right for me to, why is it all right for me to say that you have to think that, to say that you have to go and do this strike, to say that you should be in the street protesting, or to say that you shouldn't? Why am I right? And just because I can understand the third conditional, as I've already told you, I can't understand the third conditional, but just because I know a lot about the topic that I'm teaching you, does that mean that I'm allowed to impose my moral view on you? Does that mean that I'm allowed to try and, show you why, racism is wrong? Does it mean that, and I think we can all agree, can't we? We all agree that racism is wrong. And I think as a group, we'd probably all say, yeah, no, racism is not okay. And then it's really interesting because you teach students from cultures where racism is okay. And racism is very much how you make decisions about who you work with, who you don't work with, who you marry, who you don't marry. It's always a sort of real confrontation, I think, that we all struggle with. At what point do we park our moral agenda or moral compass, or our moral compass will tell us that this is really important and we should help students understand why that's wrong or why that's right. And then, I really struggle with that, and I don't know the answer to that. And if anybody does have an answer, I'd be really grateful. So go for your lives. Final thing we're going to do, right? Final exercise, and then you're free to go. All right, this is very quick. So what we do is we give students the chance to look at a historical, wonderful piece of literature. Harry Potter is a good example. I love Harry Potter. I look like most of the characters in Harry Potter, which again is a part of that, but there we are. So you give your students a scenario. We give students Juliet and Romeo, Romeo and Juliet, right? And we say to students, Romeo and Juliet, what happens if they know, and one student in the room can describe the story, right? Boy meets girl, they decide to be together, can't be together, families, vendetta, they both die, right? Somebody gives a synopsis for the room, right? If nobody knows, then of course they Google it and find the information. Great, lovely, on you go, right? Once we've all got the story in our heads, what we do with the students is we put them in pairs, right? And online, offline, fine, put them in pairs, and they have 12 messages, ladies and gents. 12 messages that they can use on their telephone. Any messaging thing, whatever service that they can, it's fine as well. If they do it through WhatsApp or TikTok or Snapchat or whatever, or email or pen and paper, it doesn't matter, right? 12 messages. And they're writing to each other multimedia messages as Romeo and Juliet. One is Romeo, one is Juliet, okay? So basically what we're doing is we're trying to get them to use the language that they use now and write an ancient story or an ancient dialogue, right? And it has to be a bit silly because, frankly, if it's a Tuesday afternoon, everybody's about to fall asleep, crack on, right? It's a Wednesday afternoon today, we're all right, we've had some tea, fine, but still, building it together. So what I do is I'll get students, and again, it's, it's 10 minutes or it's 15 minutes or it's 20 minutes, depending on their level, depending on their focus, depending on their abilities, and depending on the group. And they're working in pairs, and they're sometimes working in pairs with the director, depending on numbers of students. And they create a scenario, and I normally will get them to stand at the front of the room, or I'll get them to take the centre stage online, and they're standing back to back, and one person's got a phone, and the other person's got a phone, and they're saying, so Juliet's message is, hey, Romeo, I've been checking you out. OMG. And they, what I find students do now, which is brilliant and not my idea, and it was just students doing it, was they will act out emoticons, which is brilliant. And so you'll get students going, hey Romeo, I was checking you out. OMG. And and they do this whole thing, and they get the whole scenario, the whole dialogue. And they've only got 12 messages. It's very quick, it's very easy. And we can do it with Romeo and Juliet. We can do it with any historical figures we want to. We can do it with current figures. We did a thing a couple of years ago where we did Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and they were texting each other. And what was really interesting, of course, was being able to look at the messages students did that they thought were silly and funny, and the actual messages they'd sent each other. And obviously the students' versions were a lot more sane, but that's another topic for another day. But it's a very quick exercise, and it's really just a throwaway thing. Romeo and Juliet, 12 text messages, and they bang that backwards and forwards, and it's just fun, and it's silly, but it's also a way of unpacking a bit of lit. The other thing which we've done a lot, which has been really successful, is giving the students a date time. So they've got, October the 28th, and they've got a budget. So they've got $300, and they've got October the 28th until November the 7th, right? So they've got like a week, and you give each group the destination. So one group gets Berlin and one group gets Borneo and one group gets, and they have to build a package of a holiday. So they have to build a flight and a hotel or camping or whatever it is, depending on the budget, depending on where they're going. And they have to use apps or any online platform they can to find prices of flights, to find hotels, to find what they would do in Berlin. Where are they going to go and dance? Where are they going to go and drink? Where are they going to go and look at art? Where are they going to go and shop? Where are they going to, whatever they want to do? And then they, I'd normally divide the group into one person is doing flights, one person doing hotels, one person, and they have to work together to find the information. And then they have to present it to the group and agree it. And then they have to build a presentation together. And they present to the whole group. And this works very well online, but it works very well offline too. And they have to present it to the group. And they say, right, Berlin, we're going to go and it's going to cost this much. And we're going to fly at 3 a.m. And we're going to arrive at 7 in the morning. And then we've got the whole day and it's great. And we found a really good place to stay. And it's really cheap, but it doesn't matter because we're only going to sleep there. Or it's really expensive and it's brilliant because we want to stay in this lovely hotel. And they sell the idea of the holiday to each other in the group. And what's really nice, I've had this actually with a group of students a few years ago where they all voted on it at the end of the class and decided that they really wanted to go to Cancun in Mexico for New Year's Eve. And it's amazing because it's that thing of going, all right then. So the next exercise is now write an email to your parents asking them if you can go to Cancun with your friends for New Year's Eve. And we had 7 students from that class who ended up going to Cancun for New Year's Eve with their friends, which was really lovely. And what I've often done is break it down to a very local level. So I've done things like get students to build a holiday to Berlin, to wherever, somewhere really exotic and exciting. But then on a local level, say, right, on Saturday, what do you want to do? How are you going to get there in this area? And so students will then end up doing those things often. And it's nice because it's something attainable. And then they can report back and bring that back to the room and talk to the class and say about what they've done and where they've been. But the online thing, which I found really useful in the last few months, which made a massive difference, I think, was getting students to do a tour or do a local guiding thing. So we've got 6, 7 people in class and they're in different parts of the world, and getting students to go to their local cafe, go to their local library, go to their local shop or a place they want to hang out and interact with people in their own language, but also interact with them in English, which a lot of places, a lot of people were very keen to do and thought it was quite fun and enjoyed being, filmed when they were doing it, or at least part of the online experience for students. And I think that's the kind of gives lie to the problem that a lot of people have had with online, where they're saying, well, it's really difficult because, you don't know what they are, you don't know what they're doing, and they're not engaged. And actually, they are engaged because they're out doing it and they're out, And we had a lovely experience a couple of weeks ago. A French guy was in a cafe because that's where he was doing the class, and he then started ordering from the waiter in French, in English, and all the other participants were saying, "Do it in English, do it in English." And so he was doing it in English, and just and he was laughing, and the other participants were obviously enjoying it. And the waiter was, quite odd for a French person, but quite keen to speak English and quite enthusiastic. Sorry, that's really rude about French people, isn't it? But I think you're allowed to be rude about French people. That's an international law. And I think what's really lovely is getting students to bring in a bit of their daily lives, and that makes a massive difference. The very last thing before we finish, ladies and gents, is just karaoke. And I know that might sound bonkers, but with online classes, I found karaoke really powerful. Like at the end of the class, somebody brings a song, right? And they will either do a lip sync or they'll do an actual karaoke where they play a song really loudly. And everybody has to listen to them singing. And it's chaos and it's mental. We all sing along and you open up everybody's mics and it's just a total disaster. But it's quite fun. But it sort of ends on a high note. Not that I think learning should be fun, because it on one level should be fun, but they also need to learn. And I often find that when doing teacher training, that you'll say to people, well, listen, it's great, but the students love me. That's lovely. And if they're in a cafe and it was a social experience, wonderful. But did they learn the thing you were there to teach them? I don't know. So, ladies and gents, as I said, I've got a lot of questions, right? But I haven't got any answers. The answers that I have, the answers that you have, are far better than any I can give you. All of you are much more able to decide what works for you in your own context, and all of you are much better at deciding the ways that you can take any of these ideas we've looked at today and make them your own. And please do that, because I find what's interesting is people will often say to me, I've really enjoyed your session, I really enjoyed those ideas. And you go, oh, great, lovely. And you see them at a conference, at an event, 6 months, a year later, they say, I really enjoyed it. did you use any of them? And they go, no. And you're like, well, listen, look, crack on, So do make me a promise, ladies and gents. Come on, gather around. Make me a promise. I want you to promise me that you will use at least one of these exercises in the next week, okay? And you don't have to use all of them, and you don't have to tell us what it was like, but use one of these things, right? And just let us know how that goes. And I think what's really interesting is the people that I often talk to on this will come back to you and say, thank you, Natalia, good for you. People often come back and say, oh yeah, well, I did this thing, that thing you talked about, and I started doing it, and then this happened, and then actually, and now I do this. And I'm always going, oh, it's a much better idea than the idea I had. That's a significantly better idea. So, yeah. And, basically, I think the top tip I would say is online or offline. The top tip I think is just enjoy yourself. It doesn't have to be fun, but if you went to the class and you're bored and you're thinking, oh, I did page 48 again. If you're bored, your students are going to be bored. And if you go in and you're doing something that you're interested in, your students are probably still going to be bored because that's the nature of the students often. But at least you're not bored. That's nice. That's why I play a lot of music, because I like music. That's why I'll get up and move about, because I like getting up and moving about. Brilliant. That's me. That's the sum total of my wisdom. Oh, and we've got Simona back as well. Even better. Brilliant.
Hello.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, I would like to thank you, Thom, for this brilliant presentation. I think it was really spot on delivery of the topic, from chaos to creativity, because I think we learned a lot of inspiring tools, very creative, and thank you very much for being so funny and entertaining while doing all this. I think this is very, very inspiring. Thank you so much. So, just for you to be informed that obviously we are doing this kind of series and other efforts as well into, being up to date in terms of digital production. So we also have some digital products that you can find in our shop. I think that might be very useful for you as teachers, especially as German teachers. So that's why I would like to point out this section of our shop, which says digital products. You can go and check it out. Maybe you will find something that is interesting for you classroom as well. Thank you again, everyone, for being part of this session. Thank you, Thom, again. And excellent. Yeah, so I think we finished on time. Thank you so much.